It was one of those summer afternoons when the sun drops lower in the sky. The light turns softer, but the heat still lingers. I had spent the day at the beach alone, and just before the sun began to set, I packed my things to leave. The wind had picked up, pushing small waves onto the shore, and most people had already gone. The large, open parking lot in front of the beach was almost empty. A few cars scattered here and there, and the crunch of my shoes on the gravel was the only sound breaking the silence. As I headed toward my car, I noticed a man standing next to an old, dusty vehicle about 30 feet away. He didn't seem to be doing anything, just standing there, hands in his pockets, looking in my direction. He wasn't carrying a towel, a bag, or anything that suggested he had been at the beach. His expression didn't change as I got closer. It wasn't friendly or unfriendly, just fixed, like he was watching every step I took. I pretended not to notice and kept walking, but the feeling of being watched grew stronger. I glanced back quickly. He was in the exact same spot, unmoving, his head turning slightly to follow me. There was no one else in the parking lot at that moment. I unlocked my car and tossed my bag onto the back seat, but before I could get in, I realized the man had moved. He was no longer by his car. He had taken a few steps closer, reducing the distance between us in a way that felt intentional. He lifted his head and said slowly, "Excuse me, do you have the time?" The question was ordinary enough to almost put me at ease, but his tone was strange, lacking any urgency or genuine curiosity. I told him the time and started to get into the car, but he stayed where he was, watching me. "Can you give me a quick ride? Just up the road." "My car broke down," he said after a short pause, gesturing vaguely behind him. There was nothing behind him but the half-empty lot and a line of shrubs. I forced an awkward smile and said I couldn't, pulling the door to close. He was close enough that I knew if he reached out, he could have grabbed it before it shut. I got in and started the engine, but when I glanced to the side, I saw him walking toward the parking lot's exit, not toward his own car. His pace was slow but deliberate, like he wanted to get there before me. I drove forward cautiously, scanning the lot, and that's when I noticed something I hadn't before. At the exit, there was another car parked at an angle, blocking almost half the lane. A knot tightened in my stomach. The man from before was moving toward the driver's side of my car, and from the second vehicle, I could see a shadow stepping out. I didn't want to know who it was. I yanked the wheel sharply and headed toward the far side of the parking lot. Behind me, I heard fast footsteps crunching over the gravel, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw the first man running parallel to my car. The second vehicle started moving in a wide arc, aiming to cut me off from the other side. The lot wasn't huge, but it had enough turns and dead ends to trap someone. I pushed deeper toward the back, hoping for a second exit, but all I found was an open stretch with a few parked cars and the rest spilling into soft sand. I killed the headlights and stopped, tucking myself between two vehicles. The sound of footsteps on gravel grew closer. I could hear breathing, but I couldn't see them clearly. I crouched low in my seat, holding my breath. A car rolled slowly behind me, its headlights sweeping across my interior for just a fraction of a second before fading away. Then, to my right, I noticed a narrow strip of gravel between the sand and the last row of cars. I knew if I got stuck, I was done. But if I waited any longer, they'd find me. I hit the gas hard, the tires spitting stones as I fought to keep the wheel steady. The path curved back toward the main road, but before I could reach it, the second car appeared from the left, trying to cut me off. I swerved sharply, sliding past its front bumper by only a few feet, and burst onto the road. In my rearview mirror, I saw their headlights flare, but only for a moment. Seconds later, they went dark. I didn't know if they had stopped on purpose or were following me without lights, but I had no intention of slowing down to find out. I drove on, putting the beach and the parking lot far behind me. my thoughts moving even faster than the car. I kept going for miles without slowing until I reached a brightly lit gas station on the main road and pulled in. I sat for a moment, scanning my surroundings, but there was no sign of either car. The station was full of light and noise, the steady hum of traffic oddly comforting after the silence of the lot. I got out and started fueling, but my mind replayed the scene over and over. Maybe it was all a misunderstanding, just a strange coincidence. But the way the two men had moved, coordinated, deliberate, was too specific to ignore. I knew that if I had hesitated for even a few seconds, I might not have gotten out. As I closed the fuel cap, an old, dusty car rolled slowly along the road across from the station. I couldn't see the driver clearly, couldn't confirm it was the same car from the lot, but the feeling it gave me was enough to make me get back into my vehicle quickly. I drove off, keeping my eyes on the road ahead, but for the rest of the trip, I checked my mirrors again and again, looking for those headlights that, thankfully, never reappeared. That summer, we decided to spend a week away from the city. There were 4 of us, all in our early 20s, and the plan was to rent a small wooden cabin by a lake, deep in the forest. There were no nearby villages. The closest gas station was a 20-minute drive. That's what appealed to us. We wanted quiet, fishing, and nights around the fire. The dirt road leading to the cabin was narrow, full of rocks and sharp turns, and every so often you could catch glimpses of the water glinting between the trees. The cabin was older than we'd expected, made of dark timber with small windows, and in the back, there was a porch overlooking the lake. Inside, the smell of wood and dampness was strong, but it didn't bother us. The first day went smoothly. We explored the area, gathered firewood, and sat outside late into the night. When we finally shut the door, the silence was unlike anything you get in the city. But just before I drifted off, I thought I heard a creak from the hallway. One sharp sound, like a footstep on old wood. I didn't think much of it at the time, assuming it was one of the others getting something from the kitchen. The next morning, no one mentioned getting up during the night. I didn't bring it up, but I kept the image of that dark hallway in my mind, along with that single, dry sound from the floorboards. On the second night, I woke to a noise that didn't sound like anything natural in an old cabin. It was steady, deliberate footsteps moving down the hallway, stopping for a few seconds, and then continuing. I stayed still, listening, and knew it wasn't one of my friends because I could hear their breathing in their rooms. I didn't have the nerve to get up, so I waited until the sound stopped, and the only thing left was the faint rustle of the trees outside. The next morning, everyone swore they'd stayed in bed all night. As we talked, I noticed the back door was locked from the inside, meaning whoever had been walking around hadn't come or gone through there. At least, not in the way you'd expect. We moved on, but the atmosphere had shifted. By the third night, I was already on alert. I left my bedroom door slightly open, and at around 3 a.m., I saw a shadow move slowly across the hallway. It wasn't hurried. It was like whoever it was didn't care I could see them. I jumped up and immediately heard footsteps retreating. I shouted for the others, and together we searched the cabin. In the kitchen, we found the window open, but with no signs of forced entry. On the table was a kitchen knife missing from the set, and next to it, an opened can of food. One of my friends noticed a small metal handle under the living room rug. We pulled the rug back and uncovered a narrow trapdoor. We opened it to find a short wooden ladder leading down into a low-ceilinged space that smelled of mold. Our flashlight beam lit up a sleeping bag, a few plastic bottles, and a bag of food. In the corner was a hole in the wall. Not just a hole, but a tunnel big enough for a person to crawl through. I went in first, hunched over, and quickly realized it stretched further than I thought. The air was damp, and the earth beneath my hands was cold. After a few meters, I heard something ahead, a dull thump, then the rapid scrape of hands and knees moving fast over the ground. I yelled for the others to close the trapdoor and head outside, while I tried to follow. The tunnel curved, and for a moment I saw the back of a man crawling away quickly. When I emerged at the other end, it opened into a patch of bushes behind the cabin. He was already running, his figure vanishing into the trees, like he knew exactly where to go. We never caught him, but we found an old flashlight and a half-empty water bottle where he'd been seconds earlier. The next morning, we didn't leave right away. We searched the area behind the tunnel and found a makeshift shelter built from branches, old plastic, and torn pieces of fabric, some of them streaked with dried blood, like someone had been scratched or cut pushing through the undergrowth. Inside were empty food cans, plastic bottles, and an old phone with a cracked screen. On its memory card were dozens of photos of the cabin, some taken from a distance through the trees, others from inside, showing us sitting in the living room or sleeping in our rooms. When the police arrived, they took the phone and said they'd investigate. They never found the man, and there were too many paths through the forest to track him. The cabin's owner claimed he had no idea about the trapdoor or the tunnel, but his distant, guarded expression didn't inspire much confidence. As we drove away, I looked back down the narrow dirt road. In the shadows of the trees, for just a moment, I thought I saw the silhouette of a man standing still, watching us leave. I didn't say anything to the others, but I knew that if he'd been able to hide under our feet for days without us realizing, he could find us again anytime he wanted. It was a hot summer morning, and we had set out on a small road trip with no specific destination. We were driving along a rural road that cut through fields and small villages, the sun already high and the heat pressing down on everything. The windows were half open, and the sound of cicadas mixed with the steady hum of the engine. We had gone several miles without seeing a single car when, on a long stretch of road, we spotted a lone figure at the side. It was a young man, probably around our age, hitchhiking with a worn, dark backpack slung over one shoulder. He wore jeans and a light-colored shirt, but it was soaked through with sweat. His eyes were restless, glancing behind him every few seconds, as if he expected someone, or something, to appear. We exchanged a quick glance, and without much discussion, slowed down. The thought of someone stranded in the middle of nowhere seemed like reason enough to stop. We pulled up a few meters ahead of him. As he walked toward the car, I had a moment to study him more closely. His face looked tired, not injured, but when his hand reached for the door handle, I noticed it was trembling slightly, as though he was nervous, or had been through something he wasn't ready to talk about. He slid into the back seat without a word, dropping the backpack beside him. There was a strong smell of sweat and dirt, and his breathing was short, like he had been walking a long time. I asked where he was headed, and he simply said, "Just straight ahead," without naming a destination. His voice was low, almost rushed, and he avoided meeting my eyes in the mirror. At first he didn't speak at all. He kept his gaze fixed to the side, but every few seconds, his head would snap toward the back window. I thought maybe he was just anxious or impatient, but when I told him the road behind us was clear, he didn't respond. A few minutes later, he muttered under his breath, "Someone might be following me." The word sent a cold ripple through me. I asked who and why, but he shook his head and said, "It's complicated." The air in the car grew heavy. I tried to keep driving without showing too much concern, but I could feel his eyes moving constantly, scanning the road behind us. Then, a few minutes later, an old pickup truck appeared in the rearview mirror. At first, it was far back, but it steadily closed the distance. The hitchhiker saw it before I did and leaned forward slightly. "Don't stop," he said, his voice steadier this time, almost commanding. The truck crept closer, flashing its headlights briefly. I didn't slow down or pull aside. Instead, I kept a steady speed, but its presence loomed larger. At one point, it pulled into the opposite lane, as if to pass us, but never did. Just stayed alongside for a few seconds before sliding back. The road narrowed a few miles later, trees closing in on both sides. That's when the truck moved in again, more aggressively. I could see the shape of the driver, but not his face. The hitchhiker told me to take the next right. There was no sign, just a narrow entrance to a dirt road. I turned sharply, tires skidding on the gravel, and for a moment I felt the car losing traction. The truck followed, keeping its distance this time. The road twisted, dust rising thick behind us, making it impossible to see clearly. After a few bends, the truck was gone. I drove for a few more minutes until we emerged into a clearing. The hitchhiker told me to stop. Before the car had fully stopped, he opened the door, grabbed his backpack, and said simply, "Thank you." I didn't ask anything else. He walked quickly in the opposite direction without looking back. I thought that was the end of it, but a few miles later, on a curve, the same pickup truck suddenly emerged from a side road and blocked our path. I hit the brakes hard. The passenger door opened, and 3 men stepped out. They walked toward us slowly, their expressions leaving no doubt about their intentions. One of them came to my window and asked where we had dropped off the guy. We knew immediately who they meant and told them. They exchanged a look, then said the man had stolen a wallet from them and was running to get away. The tension spiked when they demanded, in a tone that left no room for refusal, the money that belonged to them, taken from us, because we had helped him get away. We didn't have much on us, but we handed it over without hesitation. They took it and began walking back toward their truck. A few meters away, one of them stopped, turned around, and slowly walked back to my window. "You shouldn't believe and trust strangers," he said. "Now you're accomplices to theft." He stepped back, gave a faint smile, told us to be careful, and then left. As I got back onto the main road, the only thing I could think about was how we had set out just wanting to help someone, and ended up helping a criminal instead.